In this video, I'll be going over how to create a resume. So one of the more important things about your resume is how it's formatted. That makes a huge difference between two different resumes. Even if they have the same content, the one that's formatted nicer will be much more likely to get a response. So the first step in figuring out your format is figuring out what you want to use to create your resume. So I like to use Google Docs just because it's easy and simple and I'm used to it. But the downside is that it is a bit limited in terms of your functionality. I was able to make this document, it includes like these horizontal lines. I changed the margins, and I think it looks pretty good. So even with Google Docs, you are able to add a good amount of customization, but it is a little janky. And if you want to be more precise about your customization, a good option for that is using LaTeX, which is a markdown language that you can use. And another benefit of LaTeX is that there's a lot of templates out there. So you can just search Google for a LaTeX resume template and get a bunch of free templates. So you can just find one you like and go ahead and use that. Overleaf is a website that lets you use LaTeX for free. An example is this template here, and it looks pretty complicated. Basically, on the left is like the source code of like what we write, and then on the right is like how it renders, what it looks like. So it's pretty complicated on the left, but you don't have to understand all of what's going on. You can kind of just fill in the blank with what you want to change. So for example, over here, instead of BS in computer engineering, I can change that to like my field of study. And then if I recompile it over here on the right side, I will see that under education, it says my field of study. So you don't really have to know everything that's going on. Basically, you get a lot more control, but at the same time, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So going back to the Google Doc, this is what my resume looks like right now. I have a few sections. I have education, experience, and skills and interests. So those are definitely some important categories to have. If you're a student or a recent grad, I would highly recommend putting your education up at the top, followed by either experience or personal projects, and then also having a section of skills and interests could be nice as well. But it really depends on you personally. So, if you don't have a lot of experience, maybe you want to make this skills and interests section a bit bigger, or maybe you want to have a personal project section. I've kept track of the different resumes that I've had over the past couple of years, and I think it's worth looking through them so you can get an idea of what resumes look good and what don't look so good. So the first resume that I've kept track of was back in May 2019, and this is what it looked like. So what first sticks out to me is just in general, it looks a lot less professional than what I have now. And I think that's for a number of reasons, but some that stick out are there's a lot of white space, like the margins are big, things aren't aligned very well, and the fonts aren't that great. So what may seem like small choices actually have a really big impact. So things like listing my coursework on 4 different lines, like that just adds so much white space. And I think I felt the need to fill up a whole page. And to do that, I sacrificed the formatting. And what I would recommend is if you can't fill up a whole page, it's okay, just have great formatting for the part that you do fill up, and you can leave the rest of the page blank. It's not expected that you'll have a ton of experience, at every stage of your life. So even though I didn't have much experience, I could have said a lot more. Like, take a look at this work experience. So really, my only work experience, or the only that I thought was worth mentioning, was tutoring, which was not actually all of my work experience. I had other like gigs and jobs in the past. I just didn't feel like they were relevant. And in hindsight, I think I should have added them. But for tutoring, notice I just said this: paid volunteer tutoring in all these different subjects, and that doesn't really give you an idea of what I actually did. All it says there is tutoring. Now, if you take a look at what my current resume looks like, I also have this kind of like tutoring slash teaching, and I said a lot more, right? So I have like I have this line explaining, well, what actually did I do when I was teaching? I oversaw the lecture content and delivery, blah, blah, blah. So here, I could have said a lot more. I could have said, what the result was for who I was tutoring. Like maybe they were struggling in a class and they, after I tutored them, they told me that they passed. That would be a great thing to put on the resume. Maybe I could talk about, how many people I tutored, how many hours I tutored for, kind of quantifying it and talking more about the results. That gives you a lot more content to add. Going back to the different sections, I really recommend customizing based on whatever suits you the best. So whatever you can talk about. Maybe you have a lot of experience. That's great. Make your experience section big. If you have a lot of skills, talk about that. If you're involved in a lot of things, maybe it's not even academic. Maybe it's sports or something. Go ahead and add that. If you have awards, add that. If you don't, leave it out. It's totally fine. Definitely keep the education and experience, and maybe your experience is just random gigs. That's okay. Talk about whatever you can, and don't be afraid to dive in when you do decide to talk about something. Going forward another 6 months or so, this is what my resume looked like then. This is when I think it started to look really good. Notice that I reduced the margins and I changed the fonts. I really started adding detail and filling up the page, and not just in a BS kind of way. Like I really did add content that I just chose not to talk about before for whatever reason. So going back to this first resume, for my projects, I just have one line, less than 10 words, and I just have tutoring. It's one line. I don't really say anything, but this version here, I can make tutoring and teaching into this whole big section where I have 5 lines that go into detail about what I did. So I would really say dive in and explain what you did, go into detail, talk about results, talk about what you did, and that will not only make your resume look nicer in terms of formatting by taking up more space, but it'll convey better content. And also notice that so I felt like I needed a new section for personal projects, and so I added this whole section here. So it was okay that I only had 3 things for experience. I decided to add another section to fill up more space. Now, everyone's experiences are different, so don't feel like you have to exactly match whatever template you're following. So maybe you're following a template that has a personal project section, but you don't have any. That's perfectly fine to get rid of that section and change it out for something else. Overall, it's important to make sure that you have a solid resume format and also that you're going into enough detail when you talk about the things that you do put on your resume. Don't write paragraphs, but do have lots of bullet points, starting with action words and talking about what you've done and the results that they've had.